Welcome back. It's Beyond the Box Score, the second version that you're getting because Jacob and I are sickos who feel like we never get enough time on the original Monday Beyond the Box Score to talk about all the things we want to. So we've been doing this show on Thursdays. It will actually be moving potentially to another day, which I will discuss with Jacob after this. Going to get it a little earlier. We know some of you have wanted it for waiver wire and things like that. But today we're continuing forward with our guest from FFT. And it's one of our favorites. It's Heath Cummings. And because Heath is on the show, what else would we do but talk a little Dynasty as well? So this show is going to have some Dynasty. It's going to have some deep cuts, some takes on players that we've been evaluating throughout the entire season. And before then, I'm excited to have Heath on because we get to talk about his favorite team, the Kansas City Chiefs, a team that's really brought a lot of grief to my life this year from a fantasy standpoint, which I will discuss with him as we look forward. But before we do any of that, I want to turn it over to you guys. How are you guys doing today? Heath, what's going on, my man?
Man, I want to thank you guys for having me on the show. I feel so honored, Dan, that I am one of your favorite analysts from the FFT show. So, there's like five of us. I'm one of your favorites. Definitely top five. Easy. And, it's just great to be here. I was just talking to Jacob before you showed up, Dan, because you were late as usual. That this we're in mid-season form, which for athletes means they're like peak performance. For me, it's like I need 2 naps a day.
So true. Jacob, what about you? Are you in mid-season form?
I think so. Yeah, I'm great. Heath, thank you for being here. You're one of my favorite analysts, FFT or otherwise. For those who don't know, Heath and I are both Chiefs fans. Heath and I went to the same high school, did not have any affiliation with each other, did not know each other, but now we both work for CBS, and Heath has helped me along the way. I got to talk with Sigmund Bloom yesterday, just absolutely beautiful person who kind of helped Heath get his foot in the door, was my understanding as well. So it's just cool how all that, comes together over time. I had no idea going into that conversation with Sig, and so that was just really cool. And then now we got Heath here today.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the things we wanted to do when we were cycling through our plan for this season for our first year in Beyond the Box Score. And let me also say this before the show gets rolling, because I forget every time. Please, if you like this show and you've been watching or listening all year and you want to support the show, please do us a favor and hit the like button right now. That's the biggest thing you can do for us. I've been reading a little bit into this, doing my digging on the algorithm. Likes and comments are how we get this thing to show up on other people's feeds, and that's how we get it to grow. So that's all we'll ever ask. Please hit the like button. Heath, let me ask you a question, because we talked about this with Dave last week. So you've been doing this for a while now. You've been in the industry for a while. Dynasty's been your thing. What is kind of the biggest change or the biggest thing you've seen change in the fantasy landscape, and how you've changed your strategy the most, or how you've changed your approach the most?
I mean, it's barely even the same thing now that it was. I started playing 20 years ago. I've been working in the industry. Sheesh. I was trying to remember when Bloom sent that tweet out that got me into the industry. 14 years, 15 years, maybe. And I think the obvious biggest difference is evident in Jacob Gibbs' Twitter feed. And the idea of this Beyond the Box Score. The amount of information we have, it reminds me a lot of kind of baseball when I first started, because we had the influx of all the advanced statistics, and we were kind of still, and we're doing this with football now too, still trying to figure out, okay, what is descriptive and what is predictive, and there's 7 different metrics that tell me what a running back is good at. Which of those actually matter? We've been doing this advanced statistics thing for a while, and now we're kind of starting to separate, I guess, the wheat from the, I always say it wrong. Is it the chaff or the chaff? I think it's the chaff.
This is a Midwest type of reference that I have no idea about.
100%. Yeah. I think it's actually maybe a biblical one, but
okay.
No, it's that's the biggest difference. I don't know, strategy wise, if there's been this huge change for me. I mean, when I started playing, we drafted all the quarterbacks in the first round, because obviously the quarterback matters the most. And that was in one quarterback league.
Yeah.
So everything's changed.
Yeah. And what about with Dynasty? How's that landscape changed? Is that kind of similar situation, or have you noticed anything that we're doing differently or that you've adjusted yourself?
I think it is still so dependent on the people you're playing with, right?
Yes.
Like you can get into a league with a bunch of crazy people that want to start 2 tight ends and give double points for tight ends. No, that's a league that started this year that I'm in.
Heath and I are playing each other this week, by the way. Really important
Dynasty.
matchup. He has
Nice.
my first round pick, and I'm pretty sure he's going to beat us.
It's
Oh,
a
boy.
huge matchup. I'm trying to kind of walk a tightrope, Dan. I now have 3 first-round picks in
Oh,
2025,
wow.
and I'm still in playoff contention.
That's
Um,
interesting.
and I'm playing one of the teams that I have their first-round picks, so it really could be a big win for me this week. But I think it's still like the one thing that stayed the same, especially for Dynasty, is that home leagues and analyst leagues are completely different universes.
Hmm.
And one of the most fun things that I've found, and we've got a few of them now, including the Baked Burger Dynasty League, is playing in leagues that have both. Like Scott Fish really kind of brought that into life with the Scott Fish Bowl. And so now I'm in some dynasty leagues where you've got both. And it's like those two different types of styles coming together. But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's the one thing that sometimes gets lost, but I really appreciate about fantasy. It's bringing the people together and having that league feel and just the different kind of people that change a league. And it is, I think you're right. Ultimately, a league does come down to its people from an activity standpoint, from a competitive standpoint. So it's really interesting. But let's talk some players. Let's talk some dynasty. I wanted to start the show with probably something that is interesting to most, and it's based on the news today. And it's Chuba Hubbard re-signing with the Panthers after the Panthers used major draft capital to draft Jonathan Brooks. So where are you at right now, Heath? And I'll toss this to you as well, Jacob, on both players. How do you see the situation unfolding over the rest of the season now that Brooks has been taken off the IR? And then long term, where are you at with Brooks? Does this change your ranking on him or Chuba or any of that?
Yeah. And I just wanted to look this up and make sure that like the Panthers have already committed $3 million to Miles Sanders for next year. Like this
Wow.
is an insane team doing an insane thing. And I made a huge mistake last year putting way too much into, well, they've guaranteed Miles Sanders 2.5 years worth of RB1 money. So he's clearly going to be the guy and score lots of fantasy points. And then Chuba was better. So I think the one thing you should not do is make too much out of the Panthers. Like the chances in a year and a half that the people who made this decision are going to be there aren't even very good. So it's a boost for Chuba Hubbard, obviously. I think he moved from RB 45 or so in my dynasty rankings inside the top 40, maybe close to RB 35. I still believe the same thing that I believed 6 months ago, that when Jonathan Brooks is 100%, Chuba Hubbard is not going to be the lead running back. Brooks, I think I dropped 2 spots in my rankings. He's still RB 12, I believe, in my dynasty rankings. Rest of season, I'm a little bit concerned they have nothing to play for, but they also need to get the rookie going. And I think like one of the examples I use, and it's not quite fair to Chuba Hubbard because he has been really good this year. But I don't know if you remember this, Jacob, but that first game that Kareem Hunt was active, we had like a series and a half of Carson Steele carrying the football. And then Kareem Hunt came in. And while Hunt hasn't been wildly efficient this year, it was just a clear and obvious difference that, okay, Carson Steele should maybe get 1 carry a game because Kareem Hunt's a lot better than him. And that's what I think probably Jonathan Brooks needs to do to have a fantasy role rest of season is he needs to show up and pop one. I hope he gets to play a little bit this week because it's not a bad team to do that against. I think Giants giving up the second most yards per carry to opposing running backs.
Yep.
Until he does that, I think Chuba's an RB2 and Brooks is a bench stash, and it's getting hard to stash him, isn't it, Jacob?
Yeah, man, it's rough. He's on the dynasty team that's facing Heath this week, by the way.
You should start
him. Yeah. On the Chuba side of things, I did want to point out the stat that I thought was the most interesting is that on Chuba Hubbard runs, the Panthers rank 6th out of all teams in EPA per run. On non-Chuba runs, they're 29th.
Wow.
On pass plays, they're 30th. So he's been by far the best option for the offense, really the only thing that's working. Then they give him this money. I think he's the offensive engine. The best comparison I've come up with in terms of trying to predict what the role will be this year is the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm curious what you guys think of that, with Chuba being the lead back, the better zone runner, which is what they've mostly done. Canales has been a zone heavy rush scheme. So like the Najee Harris kind of runner there, and Brooks being more of the change of pace Jaylen Warren kind of guy, who in a negative game script can be relevant, but often is not going to be relevant. Does that track, or do you think even if Brooks comes and pops one like Heath alluded to, I don't think they're taking Chuba off the field very much.
I think that makes sense to me. I was thinking about them from a skill set standpoint, and Brooks was my RB1 in this class based on the tape at Texas. And one way that I thought they would use him was in the passing game. Obviously, that might be something we get to see. Chuba's been good in the passing game, but he hasn't been like that next level that you saw with Rachaad White last year with Dave Canales. So that might be where it starts. But from a dynasty standpoint, I think about it like something that Heath said. I had a text actually earlier this morning from somebody that, not to shout this out, but somebody that works in the league that I know that I discussed football with a lot. And earlier I said to him, this was back in March during Hard Knocks when I saw Dan Morgan, the Panthers GM. I was like, I haven't seen a GM as in over his head as Dan Morgan in a long time. And I think since then we've kind of see that play out with all the trades he's made. Brian Burns originally was going to get 2 1s from the Rams, ends up settling for a 2 and a 5. Obviously this deal with Chuba after drafting Brooks. So I think ultimately, especially with David Tepper as owner, this might not be the same ownership. And I don't know how that impacts Brooks, but it doesn't feel good for me from a dynasty value standpoint. Like, even if he does pop off in a role like this, I'm skeptical of the idea of holding him with the idea that his trade value will improve in this situation. I almost want to get rid of him before we see what happens.
That, did you see how he did that, Jacob? Like he disguised this "I was right in March" take with and I talked to someone who's employed in the league take. It was really snuck it in there.
This is why I have so many haters. I now know why I now know why people hate listening to me. Now I'm kidding. That's sort of true. This is why some people don't like it. But no, I wasn't trying to do that for that reason. It's just interesting to me because I don't feel like we're as locked in on Brooks's value. Like, to me, when that happens, when you have the potential for a management change and regime change, it could totally alter that. The reason we were drafting him so high in Dynasty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm pretty nervous. I want to see him on the field before overreacting. Like, I don't know if I would necessarily be trying to get out of it right now, like you're saying, especially right after the contract news. I think people might be a little bit panicked. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to add. I think we need to see him get out there on the field.
We do. We need to see how he plays, and he could change that narrative fast. But I want to transition. What do you got, Heath?
No, I was going to say it's like one thing I noticed that was interesting because Jacob said that later in the show we're going to re-rank the rookies. And so I was doing that. And just in terms of coaching staffs, there's very few of the rookies who have done anything that I feel confident they're going to have the same head coach in like 2 years.
Okay, interesting. I'm trying to think.
Like Jaden Daniels, obviously, things look pretty
but
steady.
Brian Thomas, no.
Caleb Williams,
no. Caleb Williams, no.
Drake May,
Malik Neighbors, no. Drake May, no. That's good.
Brock Bowers,
from a dynasty standpoint. Brock Bowers, no. Wow. I mean, how does that impact dynasty though? Like, because this role, it's interesting to me. It's because like once you have that change in head coach, you're going to have a change in coordinator. You're going to change in system. Does Brock Bowers still have targets funneled through him? Well, you at that point have to bet on the talent, right? Like you would think that anyone who takes over the Raiders will understand what they have in him. But I'm not so sure that's the case for all of these players, which is interesting.
I think it's mostly concerning for the running backs, like potentially Tyrone Tracy as a later round pick. If things change there, even maybe like Trey Benson or something like that. Mm-hmm. Like if things change in Arizona, we'll see how their season ends up. It's interesting. I think Bucky and the Bucks look pretty good. I would be surprised if there's a change there.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Bulls has been underachieving a little bit considering last week I did not like that decision at all to not go for 2 there. It was unbelievable to me. But that transitions us into our next topic, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs offense in Dynasty. This one's a really interesting one that I wanted to touch on. I was very wrong about my prediction for the Chiefs this year. Now, part of that is because Hollywood got injured and Rashee Rice got injured, but no excuses. I thought this would be a return to the old form, the pass-first Chiefs. It went the complete opposite way. They are as run heavy as they've ever been. This is the most conservative team version of the Chiefs I've ever watched. I mean, I think they almost went like run, but they went run, screen pass at the end of the game last week and then gave Baker a free chance. Doing that with Mahomes to me is absurd. In the red zone, I see them settling for field goals all the time. They run the ball all the time in the red zone on first and second down. Heath, is this just what I am supposed to expect moving forward? Because Mahomes was a cheat code for me in Dynasty for a while. Where do you see this Chiefs offense moving? Is this kind of just based on the circumstance, or is this what we should expect moving forward?
I think we're kind of at an inflection point with the offense, and what we don't know is, are the last 2 weeks because DeAndre Hopkins is there, or are the last 2 weeks because they faced terrible pass defenses? Because over the last 2 weeks, Patrick Mahomes has thrown 82 passes. He has 553 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's averaging 26.5 fantasy points per game. Like if that's what we're getting, then great. And I do think, like, I don't know what you guys have thought watching the tape on Hopkins, but I don't think this guy's washed at all. Even in the limited snaps he played in his first game, like, it was just so clear that, hey, that's a professional wide receiver. He caught the ball in traffic with his hands. We don't have guys that do that. So I'm very cautiously optimistic. I think the difficult thing now about the Chiefs is projecting this to stick when you've got a 28-year-old running back and a 32-year-old wide receiver and a 34-year-old tight end. There's a lot of age and injury risk down the stretch. And then there's the possibility that I think if they win the next 2 games, they might clinch the 1 seed. So that's a bit of a problem, but I'm pretty optimistic that things are a little bit fixed for Mahomes. Broncos will be a big test. I think Hopkins is a win now piece to go acquire. And I'm optimistic.
What would be your thoughts on Worthy at this point? Sorry, Jacob, if you want to add something, you can jump in first.
I'm really curious what Jacob's thoughts are on Worthy, because I made the joke and then deleted it. I think I called him Skydarius.
No, not
Skydarius Morey.
Oh no,
because like there's big plays and they're fun, and he's really, really fast, but I have not seen him make very many real wide receiver plays at all this season.
Yeah,
I don't even want to be here anymore. Skydarius Morey. Yeah, he sucks. I don't know. He looks terrible. He's overrunning everything. What is he? What does he do? I assume will get better in terms of the timing and feel for spatial awareness and all that. But like, he looks lost. He looks like for real, like tall McCole Hardman or something. Like it's very worrisome. He had been at least getting volume. The Chiefs were trying to get him involved, but that totally evaporated last week. He got 2 targets. He couldn't get his feet in bounds on either one of them. And they instead are, pivoting to running the offense entirely through Kelsey and DeAndre Hopkins. Those two combined for like a 73% first read target rate or something between the two of them. It could get better, like for Dynasty, I don't think you really have any option but to hold. I guess you could sell him. But at the same time, like the talent is, I think, there and real. I don't know though. Like has he flashed at any point to you, Heath? We watch the Chiefs all the time. Like, has there been any moment where it's like, oh, there it is. We just need more of that? Because I don't even think I've seen that.
Well, and I have seen it on the dumb Andy Reid plays that have worked. And I shouldn't say dumb, but I don't know what else to call them. Like Worthy is the type of guy that Reid wants to run 2 or 3 of those plays a game, and sometimes they score touchdowns and sometimes they lose 10 yards in key moments. And I think like when you get him going really fast, it's like, oh, we don't have anybody else who can do that. But no, not like actually playing wide receiver, not at all.
It's so weird too, because if you go back and you watch his Texas tape, this wasn't what he was. I didn't see him being this kind of prospect ever at the NFL, not even for this short stretch. And it's early in his career, so we're all acknowledging that. But like, he was a much more complete receiver. That was part of what I thought they were getting here. Right.
It's really hard. I think it's underestimated. And Adam kind of called me out for this last year because Rashee Rice had a good second half to the year. But it is like, we even saw it with DeAndre Hopkins in the 2-minute drill, where they tried to run that same play that he and Kelsey ran against Buffalo, and Hopkins just wasn't reading what Mahomes was.
Right.
And that's almost entirely what this offense is. I don't think there's very many like, okay, 3 steps and slant, and the ball is going to be here at this point. No, we don't know what the defense is going to do yet. It's almost like our draft strategy. We can't tell you who to draft at this pick because we don't know what the rest of the league is doing.
Yeah.
Well, Mahomes doesn't know where he's throwing it until he sees where everybody is, and it's hard for rookies to adjust to that.
It's a great point, and we'll see if he can get going at some point. But let's transition now. Let's talk a little bit about some running backs in Dynasty that are very interesting, and we can discuss. Let's start with Jahmyr Gibbs, who I believe is your RB1 in Dynasty. Is that correct, Heath?
I think it's actually, I just updated it today.
Okay.
So that's the reason, or last night. And the reason I hesitate is I think it's actually like tied.
Okay.
I do have Bijan technically at 1, Gibbs technically at 2, but I use kind of a formula for determining value, and they are tied to the 100th decimal point. So yeah, Bijan and Gibbs are co-RB1s.
That's KTC value that you're looking at there. That's Keep Trade Cut, the most popular resource for like evaluating players for trades. They have him at RB1.
I'm the second most popular resource, Dan.
I thought that was really, really interesting because they also have, and this is the Dynasty community votes on this, and it comes together. They have David Montgomery, consensus RB14. Both running backs have risen throughout the year, which I think makes sense. The offense is amazing, but it's also just crazy. There's no other team like this in terms of like 2 teammates ranking in the top 20 or even top 30, with one of them being that high. Like Tyler Algier is running back 43. Braylon Allen is running back 31. Zach Charbonnet is running back 36, to give you some other counterparts to like top 5 running backs. Do you think this is appropriate for both of them, or is it possible if David Montgomery is going to be this good and remain involved and be RB14, which indicates, I would assume, that he's going to stay attached to this really high-powered offense and be an important part of it, then is Gibbs truly the most valuable running back? Would we expect his role to improve in any significant way?
So like valuing running backs in Dynasty and having one list for all teams is like one of the most difficult things I think about Dynasty football analysis, because if I'm not a contender, David Montgomery is probably not a top 30 running back to me. And in my rankings right now, David Montgomery is RB26. So I think it's pretty insane to value the current RB14 that is 27 years old also as the Dynasty RB14.
Yeah.
So I could understand for a contender, yeah, maybe David Montgomery's worth RB14. But there's, at this point in the season, especially, half the teams in the league don't have any interest in David Montgomery at all, or any need for him. So I think he's overvalued. He would be a sell for me at that cost unless you're one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the league.
And there's also go ahead, Jacob.
He's signed through 2027, and I feel like they're in love with him. They haven't.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
So I just don't see how the situation's going to change much over the next like 3 years.
Well, the situation could change greatly if Ben Johnson takes a head coaching job somewhere else, which is likely.
Yeah, maybe. Like they would not use him as much with a different OC.
Look,
you think
they would probably try to bring in somebody in house to try to mimic what Ben Johnson does. That almost never works in the NFL. So if the scheme is less effective, he will be less effective, in my opinion, as will Gibbs, as will the entire offense.
Also, and I don't know like what you guys think about this, and I've gotten burnt badly by it this year in fantasy football. Like Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley, my 2 worst calls of the year. But I don't think that we're in some new reality where running backs just don't get worse from 27 to 30.
Yeah,
I think that most of them, like if you're going to start betting on running backs this age, I'm going to trust the last 2 decades of information more than I trust this season. That seems to me to be a kind of a weird outlier when we had a terrible running back class come in. And we have some truly transcendent Hall of Famers that are at that point in their career. David Montgomery's been good. He's not that. So I do think like what changes probably is David Montgomery's probably not as effective relatively soon.
So he's probably overvalued. And I wanted to talk then about him, and he's at the top of this tier. Well, really, Joe Mixon is at the top of this tier, running back 13. Mm-hmm. But we've got a tier of older running backs, 26, 27, 28-year-olds, running back 13, Mixon, running back 14, Montgomery, running back 15, Josh Jacobs, then Pacheco, Brian Robinson, Alvin Kamara, running back 18. I'm curious where you have those guys, Heath. Like even J.K. Dobbins and Najee Harris are in this range, running back 23, running back 24, Tony Pollard, running back 26. And then also in this range, we find Bucky Irving, Tyrone Tracy, Chase Brown, some of these young guys, Tank Bigsby, even our guy Tank Bigsby is pushed ahead of Travis Etienne. We're going to talk about the rookies in more detail after our next ad break. But first, I was curious, like, does anyone among these older guys stand out as somebody that you think actually deserves to be in this space, or are basically all of these guys a little bit overrated, kind of like you think Montgomery is?
Oh, I think of the older backs that you mentioned, and I am lower on all of them, pretty considerably lower on all of them, except for one, and this might end up being a mistake, but Alvin Kamara I do have still in this range, and it's not because I think he has a lot of longevity after this year. It's because I think it's possible that he's the best player in fantasy for the rest of the season. Just that, what do you have, 38 touches or something in their most recent game? He's their leading rusher and leading receiver. And so like the guy that could legitimately, you could say this guy is going to win you the league by himself. He just has to be ranked that high. I'm a little bit concerned with Mixon's schedule at the end of the year. And again, I don't know what Mixon has beyond this year. I'm much, much lower on James Conner, who I think is in that list. The other one that I just wouldn't put in the same category is J.K. Dobbins. I think he's still just 25 years old. And I kind of think that J.K. Dobbins, that if he stays healthy, you have to say it, I think he's probably better next year than he is this year.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at J.K. Dobbins as like a no doubt about it top 12 running back next year. So at his age, and with the hope that he's better next year, and with my general not caring about injuries that much, I think Dobbins might be my highest ranked guy in this group, followed right by Kamara right behind him.
Okay. And just a few months younger than Dobbins is Brian Robinson, who is 6 spots ahead of Dobbins. He's just behind Pacheco, Jacobs, Montgomery, Mixon.
So I've got it Dobbins 14, Kamara 15, Robinson 16.
Oh, wow. Okay. Dobbins 14.
Yeah, right. Those three are the only three from that group. I think the thing that the other guys you mentioned, the Chase Brown, the Tracy,
Bucky
and Bucky, those guys don't feel like they have the safety that should come with their age.
Yeah.
If you told me Tyrone Tracy was replaced as a lead running back of the Giants next year, I would not be surprised at all.
I think I agree. I think Chase Brown, it feels the least safe, and Bucky feels the most safe of that group. I wanted to just real quick stay with Brian Robinson because he's somebody that I've been a little bit too low on in ranks perpetually, I think.
Yes.
Not having, enough faith in Cliff going into the year and everything. I think he would be ahead of everyone in this tier for me. I haven't done my Dynasty ranks in a while, but I think you could push him ahead of all of these guys. He's really impressed me. He's attached to Jaden Daniels. The organization seems in love with him. He's been awesome this year. He keeps getting better every year. That's where you're at too, Dan?
I'm even higher, I think. I would have him just borderline top 12 for me, Dynasty, maybe even higher for the reasons you mentioned, all of them, including an extra one, which would be, I look back at something like before the year, this was the one thing I was faithful in, which was Cliff Kingsbury being able to generate a run game because of what he was able to do in Arizona with Chase Edmonds, which was impressive. And looking at the tape this year, now, part of this is because he has Jaden Daniels, which makes it even easier. He had Kyler too, which helped from that standpoint. But the way they're able to generate plays in the run game, chunk gains, and the way they're able to use these linemen on the move, some just like fun concepts, like fun dart concept that you don't see a lot of teams running. That's just really puts a lineman on the move and gets them going in a full head of steam in space. It's something I have faith in. So I have faith in the run game. I have faith in it from a schematic standpoint. I have faith in his talent. I have faith in the offense with Jaden Daniels. He's young and they love him. So when all those factors are combined, like I don't really see any reason not to put him in my top 12 Dynasty.
I think the reason is the same reason that I agree with everything you guys said. He's been awesome as a rusher. The scheme's been great for him. He's averaging 4.6 yards per carry, and he scored almost a touchdown per game. and he's RB 23 per game because he has 2 games with more than 1 catch.
Yeah.
Like he just has no role in the passing game.
Yeah.
I would have lost a lot of money if you'd have told me that J.K. Dobbins was going to catch 3 times as many passes as Brian Robinson Jr. this year. But that's what's happening. And so I think if you're gonna give him the edge because of what we're seeing in terms of the scheme, you also have to ding him because the coaching staff isn't using him as a pass catcher at all.
True.
I think that's fair. Another guy who I think belongs in this tier but is ranked behind all of them is Rhamondre Stevenson. He will be 27 at the end of the year. I'm really, really bullish on Drake May. I know Dan is as well. And just about everybody we seem to bring on Beyond the Box Score is. Do you have any thoughts on Rhamondre, Drake May, and maybe this offense being better?
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable with how high Rhamondre is in my rankings. So you're validating me a little bit by saying that he's actually at the top of this group for me.
Wow.
He's got the contract. He's got that for some reason the coaching staff keeps throwing to him, even though like throwing to Rhamondre Stevenson over the past 3 seasons has been one of the worst plays in football. And he's good as a rusher. And I think the run scheme and offense are only going to get better. So I think Rhamondre is a borderline RB1 for dynasty purposes.
Wow. Okay.
I like that.
Do you have any thoughts on Tank Bigsby, Dan's boy?
It's like rookie Brian Robinson, because they do not want, not rookie, he's a second year. They do not want to throw to him at all. And I don't like everybody wants Travis Etienne to go away, but I think Travis Etienne's more likely to be there next year than Doug Peterson is, because Travis Etienne has a good relationship with the quarterback. So I'm skeptical that he's going to be more than a part-time back.
I have a question. Yeah, go ahead, Jacob.
No, you're good.
I was just thinking about one situation that Jacob and I have spent like way too much time talking about this year because we like the we like the coordinator. He's having a bit of a rough start, but we like some of the stuff he does in the run scheme. It's Arizona, and I saw some stats today from Jacob that you put on Twitter about just how unbelievably effective James Conner still is today and is this season. Mm-hmm. Now they drafted Trey Benson, a player out of Florida State who was really impressive on tape. Where are you at with Heath? Where are you at with the Cardinals running back situation right now?
I like Conner as a win now piece for this year, but I kind of view him and Aaron Jones the same. Maybe 4 teams in the league should have any interest in them. And they also feel like ticking time bombs. Like these are the types of guys, if I'm trading for them, I'm like, when is my trade deadline? Okay, I want to trade for them about 5 minutes before that because I don't want them to play as few football games as possible. Because they're 29-year-old running backs with extensive injury histories. And I do worry about that more than I do with a 25-year-old like Dobbins. So I think they could be potential RB2s for a championship team this year. I would not expect anything beyond this year.
I think that's fair, Jacob.
I think that's a good point to bring up. I do that with aging running backs all the time where it's like, and sometimes I get myself in trouble where it's my team is 3-6 and I really should probably help it out, but I just don't want to trade for this guy who might get hurt next week. Like, so I'll just wait another couple of weeks. If he's healthy and I'm still contending, then I'll trade a pick for him. And if he's not, then I tank or whatever. It's not that big of it. It's not the end of the world. James Conner's been freaking awesome. And I did want to give this stat just in case anybody missed it on Twitter. Top 3 in missed tackles forced on the year. Bijan Robinson, Kenneth Walker tied at second with 31. James Conner's at first with 54.
Wow.
Absolutely insane. And this week he faces the Jets, who are dead last in tackle conversion rate against running backs.
Well, that sounds like it's going to be a pretty good week for James Conner. Dan said something, though, and I remember you like sending me and the guys, Jacob, a lot of propaganda about the Arizona run game scheme earlier in the year. And they've been awesome. It's going great. Kyler's averaged like 7 yards a carry too. But how do you balance that in terms of your affection for the offensive scheme there with the fact that Marvin Harrison Jr. is tied, like literally chained to the sideline, just going up and down like he's on one of those old. Remember the track games they used to have where they could only go one direction? He just goes back and forth up and down the sideline.
Do you ever played electric football, buzzer football? That's the worst. Me and my friend have decided it's the worst game ever created and constructed. But it's like that where they just go forward in one direction.
For what it's worth, they have been using Marv more on horizontally breaking routes lately. Not quite as many go routes. I'm checking on that. Yeah, the last 3 weeks, his go route rate has been at 21% or lower. Um, I, yeah, I do really like Drew Petzing, but he does get a big galaxy brain sometimes, and his usage for Marvin has been frustrating at times. I'm more inclined to just be frustrated with Kyler Murray, honestly.
Same.
Yeah.
I was watching that game and listening to the broadcast, and the announcer said that Kyler Murray told them during the week he's playing the best quarterback that he's ever played. He's never been more comfortable. He's never felt like he saw things as well as he does. He loves the system. Says he's never played quarterback better than he's playing right now.
I believe that, but it's not like a rhythmic passing game. So like there's not like part of the reason like Harrison, part of the projection for Harrison was he's going to win on these in breakers over the intermediate areas of the field and on outs. But like they're not using him on in breakers, and Kyler Murray doesn't use the middle of the field. It's not a rhythmic passing game. Like he is seeing it well, but a lot of it is just like play action McBride, right? Or like, shot outside the numbers to Marvin Harrison, either a fade or a go ball, and then run and design run games. So like, I guess he's seeing this system correctly, but it's not like watching a Stafford system. It's not like watching some of these really advanced passing games that rely on timing and rhythm. So that's what has me concerned about Harrison, this changing too much for Harrison moving forward with this quarterback.
While we're here with Arizona, do we have any Trey Benson thoughts? Have you guys been able to watch him? He broke off a nice run last week. He also scored on a goal and opportunity where James Conner got a little dinged up and had to come out of the game after a long drive. What I was bringing to Heath's attention early in the year was that they were doing all these pin pull runs and counter runs out of the shotgun. And I think that was intentionally designed to complement Benson's skill set. He had more counter runs than any running back drafted over the past 10 years at the collegiate level. And so I think they're trying to unlock something with him and Kyler, and they've kind of given up on it because it was not working early in the year. Do you guys have any Benson thoughts? I think he's a really interesting player.
I'll let Dan talk more about the film. I'll just say from an amateur film watcher, I think he looks a lot more right now like I expected him to look than he did earlier in the year. I think he's gotten more comfortable in the scheme, more comfortable in the NFL. I think I mean, it doesn't look like he's going to be like a league-winning running back or something to me, but I think he looks like a good starting running back.
I think Heath nailed it. Heath nailed it there with the idea that, look, he's more comfortable. He's reading it better. And this is a player who 2 years ago broke the Pro Football Focus record for the most forced missed tackles per rush in a season, beating guys out like Travis Etienne, who was amazing at the collegiate level at that. And I believe the other guy was Javonte Williams, who before the injuries was a totally different player at UNC, really electric. So he has that ability to him. He's also a high runner. That's something I always noted watching him at Florida State. And that's funny to me because that's what James Conner is. And maybe it works in this kind of system when you have a lot of guys pulling, you have a lot of these power gap concepts. It's maybe something that they looked into as to why they drafted him. But one area I want to see the Cardinals improve in using him, and who knows if this will happen with Kyler Murray, but he was really a nice weapon as a receiver at the collegiate level at Florida State, both in the screen game and then on like wheel routes and situations where they can throw him a 50-50 fade type ball. So that's something I'll be looking for as we move forward with Benson.
All right. Do you want to transition to the rest of the rookies?
We're going to close the show out with a fun segment here, re-ranking the rookies, how they are today. And this is going to help you guys for Dynasty, we hope. So let's do it. Hey, let's do it. Where are you at now, Heath, with the rookies? Have you re-ranked them and what has changed?
I went through after I saw that on the rundown, and I think I have a top 36 of the rookies.
Okay.
Ranked.
Cool.
I don't feel super confident in certain section of it, so it might be better to do those as tiers. But I think like the one thing that seems pretty obvious to me that even if we're looking at it in a super flex league, my top two players right now would be Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors. I think Caleb's had a little fall.
I think you could put Bowers there, especially if you're tight end premium and stuff. I think you put him up with Neighbors, but yeah.
I think tight end premium, he might be number one. Number two at worst. But yes.
So one question I have with that, and I think that's fair as far as the versus Marv Harrison, somebody we had in that range. I want to talk about another player who you can make a case has been better than Malik Neighbors in some ways, both on tape and by the numbers, though obviously their quarterback situations are different. And I want to know if he's in the mix for you guys with that tier, and it's Brian Thomas Jr. And look, maybe he wasn't ballyhooed as the same kind of prospect, but from a size, speed, athleticism standpoint, he had all of the traits that could make him one of the elite guys in the NFL. Where are you guys at with BTJ as far as ranking him in that elite range?
You know where I'm at with BTJ. I love BTJ, but I'm not ready to put him ahead of Neighbors. I think Neighbors might be the best player from this draft class when we look back at it. I think one really fun stat that I dug up this week when looking at matchups is that when the quarterback is not pressured, he has a 44% target share or target per route run rate. That's nuts. Like, it's just been so disjointed lately. But like, if all things are equal, if he's in a functional offensive environment, he's getting targeted almost half the time. And part of that is because the Giants don't have a ton of other great targets. But part of it is because he's open all the time. If you look at average separation scores and all of that, his ability to beat man coverage, his ability to beat press coverage, all of these are like, I can't wait to dig into it more in the offseason, because it's like, these are all signals that we got from like Jamar Chase and people like that early on, where it's like, he looks like a truly, truly special player. Brian Thomas Jr. is amazing. The things he can do for somebody who's running such deep routes and everything is like reminiscent of Nico Collins or somebody like that, which is really, really good. But if you're looking for somebody who might be able to truly win every single way possible, then it's like, yeah, that looks like Neighbors.
It's been a bit of a roller coaster ride for me with Thomas, because I was way in on him in rookie drafts. I was way in on him in round 8 in redraft. That was fantastic.
Nice.
And then it's like, this happens a lot if you don't react quite as quickly as everyone else does. Like, everyone just zoomed past me, and now we're talking about Brian Thomas Jr. being better than Malik Neighbors in Dynasty, maybe. And I'm like, yeah, I still have him as, or I guess I don't. It's not still. He did pass Odunze for me. He has not quite passed Marvin Harrison Jr. for me. And part of it is, I'm not sure how much faith I have that the Jacksonville offense is going to be competent moving forward. They don't have a great history in terms of hiring and building.
True.
And so I can assume, Doug Peterson's going to be gone next year. I have a hard time assuming it's going to be a lot better until I see who it is. Now, if they go get Ben Johnson, then obviously, like, things are looking a lot better. But then if they do, does he want an Amon-Ra St. Brown or a Cooper Kupp? And I don't think Brian Thomas is probably doing that.
No, that's not going to be the role.
He was actually a little bit lower for me, behind Daniels, behind Neighbors, and rocking super flex here. Then I had Caleb, May, Harrison, Bowers, Thomas.
Okay. Well, let me ask you. Yeah, go ahead.
Just real quick on Thomas, I think it's also important, this with his prototype, I do think he needs a functional offense, or at least somewhat functional, like somebody like Trevor who can do some things and deliver him the ball down the field. Neighbors, we saw, was completely dominating early in the year with a terrible offense. Once the left tackle was lost, then it became like complete ineptitude in New York. Then it's fallen off like it would for anybody. But he's the kind of guy who can get targets all over the field, whereas Thomas is like, he needs that to work for it to work. And then also, what's his ultimate ceiling? There's only really, unless you're like Justin Jefferson or Josh Gordon, to be somebody who's, or like Randy Moss or something, to be somebody who's running so many downfield routes. To be a truly, truly elite fantasy player is pretty unique. I think really more likely the best case is something like Mike Evans, just from a prototype standpoint, which is amazing. Still awesome. It's amazing, yeah.
Unfortunately, that's also kind of what it looks like for Marvin Harrison right now.
Yes, no, exact same thing, except to me, I'm taking BTJ just based off what we've seen this year.
I don't hate that take either for a fantasy standpoint.
Right. But the one, like the guy that I said is right behind Brian Thomas Jr., Odunze, is the guy that I kind of had a take for this year. I think he's the Bears' best wide receiver rest of season.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
He leads the wide receivers in yards per route run, leads the wide receivers in yards per target, had an 88% snap share last week, was his highest since Keenan, when Keenan's been healthy. And in 2 weeks since the bye, he's only run 8 fewer routes than DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. So I think this is kind of a buy opportunity on Odunze. I wouldn't be surprised if a month from now we're arguing, should he be ranked as higher than Brian Thomas or higher than Marvin Harrison in Dynasty?
I like that. And that's a little bit what I struggle with a bit is buying. It's a lot of projection for me with Odunze from a dynasty standpoint, just because I love his rapport with Caleb. But I don't, that's like another team that hasn't done a great job with their coaching hires and hasn't done a great job getting the right systems in. And I hope they're going to make a move this offseason. I can't stand watching Shane Waldron offense. Unfortunately, I drag him a lot on Beyond the Box Score, but rightfully so for those who watch the tape and for those who watch this offense. I think Dan Orlovsky did a great job breaking it down this week, if you want to check that out. But let's talk about a healthy situation moving forward, at least one I deem to be healthy, and how it impacts the dynasty ranking of this player for you, Heath. And that's Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert. God, I love watching tape on Justin Herbert. He's so freaking good at football. And Ladd McConkey. Where are you at with McConkey? Is he someone who's moved up at all for you?
I think he's almost well, he probably has moved up a spot in amongst wide receivers, because I had Xavier Worthy ahead of him, and I would prefer Ladd McConkey over Xavier Worthy now. If you're talking about true super flex rankings, there's a quarterback who I had behind him who has moved ahead of him, who we can talk about in just a second as well. You can probably guess who it is. But I'm still a little bit skeptical that Ladd McConkey is going to play multiple full seasons in the NFL. And I'm kind of excited about Quentin Johnston and what we've seen from him, and a little bit lower ADOT and a much larger yak per reception. And so I think this is a good 1-2 punch. It's still going to be, even though, yes, they've opened things up a little bit. We're celebrating they let him throw 30 passes. It's not going to turn into some super high-flying offense. And they're probably going to have a different wide receiver one next year or the year after. So he's a round pick 12 for me in re-ranking the rookies. He has passed Xavier Worthy. I do like Ladd over Keon Coleman and Xavier Legette, but I would prefer Thomas, Odunze, Harrison, Neighbors pretty easily.
Any other? Go ahead, Jacob.
I think everybody knows where I'm at with McConkey. I don't think anybody's risen more for me than McConkey this year in terms of my perception of a player. He is the most electric route runner I'm watching right now. That's not like a clear, Justin Jefferson or something like that. He reminds me of Josh Downs with like no wasted movement at all. And I think adding players to the equation is only going to help. I think if he gets like a true wide receiver one there, then it's like, okay, now we've got like a souped up version of Tyler Lockett type of efficient player attached to Justin Herbert. And that's just super, super exciting. This is all projection. We'll see. But like he also has really, really really encouraging per route data as a rookie too, to back up what you see on the field.
I really like that Tyler Lockett comp for Ladd McConkey. I've never heard that one, but Tyler Lockett's ability to get in it, like we know Lockett as a receiver who's developed a big vertical game at the NFL level. But if you watched him at Kansas, I believe it was Kansas State. It's a long time ago now.
Yeah.
It was really his ability to get in and out of his breaks, similar to what you just said with McConkey at Georgia. His tape was it's so good getting in and out of his breaks, which creates separation, which creates receptions. But I feel like there's been a little bit more on the bone for McConkey in the vertical passing game than I was used to seeing at Georgia, held back in some ways by Carson Beck and moved forward in some ways by just an arm talent like Justin Herbert. And that's what has me excited about him.
He scares the crap out of defenses. You see these busted plays where it's like, why did that safety just not worry at all about Quentin Johnston running down the sideline? It's because he was terrified about Ladd McConkey, because the whole defense is converging to the middle of the field over and over.
Yep, he's been from a film standpoint, he's been super impressive. But that was kind of how it was at Georgia, and I still think it does remain, and Heath mentioned this earlier, but it does remain pointing out again his injury history and just his profile, his size profile. It is a little concerning as far as holding up at the NFL level from a dynasty standpoint. All right, any other rookies you wanted to talk about that changed a lot in your rankings, Heath, or just players that are of note to you?
Well, I think I know he's a favorite of yours, Dan, and of the shows.
Okay.
I think we have to talk about Bo Nix.
Oh, there we go. Bo Nix.
Do we?
We do.
Bo Nix, what have you seen?
Well, first off, I love the way that like Sean Payton now has a guy who's not like established as a starter. He can make him do pretty much whatever he wants to. And I love the way that Sean Payton is using Bo Nix as a red zone rusher. And we knew he was underrated coming in to the league for that. And the fact that like, this is kind of gross, but this Broncos team is in the playoffs, I think, as of right now. And after they play the Chiefs this week, they've got the Falcons, the Raiders, the Browns, the Colts.
Oh
Like
my God.
they might be a playoff team. I
my
think
God.
Bo Nix is starting like at least 3 more years.
Wild card weekend, Bo Nix.
We might get wild card weekend. Now, maybe things like he Tebow's at some point and he loses that. But I think he is a solid QB2 probably for the next 3 years because of what he does as a rusher. His weapons are probably not going to be worse over the next couple of years. Like Cortland Sutton's good, but the rest of the offense is pretty much a disaster. He's going to get more comfortable in the system. I'm encouraged by Bo Nix. He's not good, but he's one of those guys and better for fantasy than he is for real life.
I think that's fair.
And they're winning.
We've seen the receiving upside.
Yes, receiving upside.
Nate Tice compared him to Taysom Hill, and like I can't unsee it since then.
It is like a small version of Taysom Hill. But there are some higher end moments from a throwing standpoint than Hill, I will say. Though Hill has a few good throws on his resume as well. I think that I like the take, Heath, but I feel like everything that we just discussed is almost like propped up by like a playing card house. Like, when you used to build those playing card houses, and any one thing could pull that out. And there are situations, we've seen it a lot, even with Stroud a little bit this year, where, rookie year, Davis Mills was a great example. Quarterback looks good, even on tape, everything checks out. Defenses get 8 games, 9 games of tape on them, and they take away all the concepts that were working, and they become almost unplayable. That, to me, remains a possibility for Bo Nix as we move forward.
Right.
I just don't like how there are just so many moments on tape from when I watch him where the ball placement is just way off from clean pockets. That's something that's sticky over year. I think Pro Football Focus did a good study on that. When you want to look to quarterback ball placement accuracy, look for the clean pocket throws, because those are the ones that you might be, you can't predict pressure year over year. It could change so much. So there's still so many red flags, but from a fantasy standpoint, we have to acknowledge what he's doing in the run game. Like you said, his usage in the red zone, and the fact that he doesn't really have much weapons to work with, and they're winning games. That all leads to him potentially being somebody who could be a dynasty asset. So I think it's worth acknowledging at this point. I'm glad you brought him up on the show. Jacob, do you have anything else on Nix?
No, I think there's upside. I'm terrified, like in investing in him and believing in him as like a multi-year option, just because I do agree with what you're saying. The defenses will probably find ways to really shut down what they're doing. And if he has I think it wouldn't be surprised at all if there's like a 3 or 4 week stretch where it's like, this is not real football. This is not competent football. We can't move the ball at all. We have to go in a different direction. I don't know. It feels, you watch it sometimes and it's like, it feels hopeless.
Yeah.
Like he just can't do it. Yeah. But for fantasy, like if it works out, and especially if the offense gets better, like he could really be pretty good.
I know, it's interesting. And just so many I remember all the super flex drafts I was in, he was drafted after Penix almost every time. He was drafted after McCarthy definitely every time. And right now, like if you're trying to win now in Dynasty Superflex, I know you want Bo Nix over those 2 guys on your roster. Like there's a chance Darnold comes back. If he wins a playoff game or 2, or even just 1, he's probably back. And as far as Penix goes, like I don't know when we'll see him on the field by the time he's 32 or something. Like
I've got him ahead, like not just for contenders, but I've got him ahead of McCarthy and Penix just in my regular Dynasty rankings now.
Yeah, because he's proven it too on the field in the NFL games to some extent, obviously, but at least from a fantasy standpoint. Again, this is what we're focused on. We're not focused on him as a quarterback as much. So it's interesting.
Daniel Jones is still getting starts, so we probably got 5 years of Bo Nix left.
Well, that if anybody ever repeats what the Giants did, they should be tried and put under trial immediately. Put that guy out for 6 years. But that's a great way to end the show, I think. Just bashing Daniel Jones one last time. I'm sure my haters will love that one too.
Where can people find your updated Dynasty ranks?
Yes.
You said the rookies. Do you have that available for people, or do you want to run through
the rookies? I just did for you guys.
Do you want to run through
maybe
names?
I'll try to get that turned into a piece of content, but probably not. Maybe it'll be next week's show. No, you can find the rankings on our fantasy football homepage. On the far right side, there's a link that says Dynasty landing page. I say this, the articles themselves say this, those rankings articles don't get updated regularly, but you can tell within the spreadsheet, the actual positional rankings get updated every single week. So every week, Wednesday or Thursday, you're going to see a full new top 50 at quarterback and tight end, top 100 at running back and wide receiver. And then those all feed into my own Dynasty trade chart, which is available on Sportsline. I have a 1QB version. I have a super flex version. I always like to tell people, like Jacob was talking about Keep Trade Cut. There's great resources like Keep Trade Cut, like Dynasty League Football, like the Dynasty Trade Calculator that tell you what the general consensus is. That is not what I'm trying to do with my trade charts. My trade charts are what my opinion is. So what I say is, like, if you value my opinion, then compare and contrast my trade chart to the Keep Trade Cut or the other analyst or industry trade charts, and you can find values that way.
Exactly. Like just what we talk about with David Montgomery is just the best example where we'll be able to find discrepancies. And it's like, especially if this doesn't fit your strategy, maybe you can get a huge win because so many people are using KTC.
Right.
And so it's like, this is for a lot of people the perceived value, when actually, if you look at Heath's work, that it's much, much different. And so you can find trade partners using that.
And what I like to do is you just go to all, like, there's 4 or 5 different trade calculators now. So when you send a trade offer, go and put the trade into each of them, see which one shows the most favorable for the other person, and then just attach that to the offer. So you can see if you're trying to. Don't do that to Dan, though, because Dan's not going to respond to your Dynasty trade offer. He's going to see it in his inbox, and then he's going to go send a message out to the league, tell them that he's trying to trade for the exact thing that you just offered him, that he won't even give you a counter offer on.
Oh, the Kelsey trade. I can't give a 1 for Travis Kelsey right now. I think this dude looks
Romeo
like
Dobbs is there too.
He looks like he's about to retire the next day, let alone play out the rest of the season. I'm not even sure we'll get the rest of the year.
Probably tight end 1 rest of the year. I'll trade him to Thomas. I guess he can flex him against you in the fantasy.
We'll talk. It's not over yet. I've looked at that trade, but Kelsey for a 1 feels a little gross to me right now. I don't know how to explain it. And now I have Mike Gesicki in that league, so just keep that.
That's good for at least one more night.
Exactly. All right, Heath, thank you so much for joining us. It was fun. I love talking Dynasty with you. I think both of us have had an opportunity to do it on the FFT Dynasty show, but we've never had a chance to do it on BTB. So it was fun time. For everybody else, have a great rest of your weekend. Please make sure you help support the show by subscribing right now and by liking this video. That's all we'll ever ask. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week, and we will talk to you soon.